The high desert wind carries secrets, but none as sharp as the one that sealed Olivia Harrington's fate. She wasn't sold for cattle or for gold. She was bartered for her father's worthless signature on a bad debt. Her price, to become the bride of Silas Stoneheart, the most feared Comanche warrior in the territory. He was a man spoken of in whispers, a spectre of the plains whose raids left nothing but silence. They forced her into his arms to save their own skins, abandoning her to a life she believed would be brutal and short. But they never knew the truth of the man behind the war paint. They didn't know his heart, a fortress locked from the inside, and Olivia, his prisoner, was the only one who might find the key. The dust was a living thing in the Texas panhandle. It coated Olivia Harrington's tongue, settled in the lines of her palms, and painted the failing clapboard of her father's ranch in a permanent shade of defeat. At 20, Olivia had the resilient beauty of a prairie wildflower, but her eyes, the color of a stormy sky, held a weariness that didn't belong to youth. That weariness crystallized into cold dread the moment she saw the buggy crest the ridge. It was too clean, too black. It belonged to only one man, Jedediah Thorne. Thorne was a man who owned things. He owned the bank in the nearest town. He owned the saloon. And, for all intents and purposes, he owned her father, Amos Harrington. Amos was a man of weak smiles and weaker whiskey, a gambler who had wagered his last remaining asset, his ranch, the barren pine, on a hand of cards that Thorne had, of course, dealt. Olivia stood on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, as Thorne descended from the buggy. He wasn't a large man, but he filled the space around him, dressed in a black wool suit despite the oppressive heat. His eyes, small and dark, appraised her before they even flicked to her father, who was shuffling nervously in the doorway. "Mr. Thorne," Amos said, his voice a reedy tremor. "A pleasure, sir. Can I offer some water?" "I'm not here for water, Harrington," Thorne said, his voice as dry as the riverbed. He stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning beneath his polished boots. He took off his hat, revealing a pale, damp forehead. "The note is due. Today." "Now, Jedediah," Amos began, trying for a friendly tone that curdled in the air. "I just need a small extension. The cattle market." "The market is fine," Thorne cut him off. "Your management is the problem. The debt stands. $5,000. You have it, or I take the ranch. And I will take it." Olivia's stomach turned to ice. $5,000. They might as well have asked for the moon. She knew her father didn't have 5 cents. Amos Harrington finally broke. His shoulders slumped, and he looked like a sack of loose grain. I don't have it." Thorne smiled, a thin reptilian action. "I knew that. You're a predictable failure, Amos, but, as it happens, I am prepared to offer an alternative." Amos looked up, a pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes. "Anything, Jedediah. Anything." Thorne's gaze slid to Olivia. It lingered, appraisive and cold, making her skin crawl. "Not anything. Her." Olivia froze. Amos paled. "Sir? My daughter? I don't understand." "It's simple," Thorne said, turning his full attention to Olivia. "I have business interests that extend beyond this patch of dirt. The Comanche are proving troublesome. They've been raiding supply lines north of the Red River. Specifically, the Quahadi band led by the man they call Silas Stoneheart." The name dropped into the conversation like a boulder. Even Olivia knew that name. He was a ghost, a brute, a leader whose name was used to scare children and grown men alike. They said he was merciless, that he'd been raised on warfare and had ice in his veins. "The army at Fort Sill can't contain him," Thorne continued. "He's smarter than their colonels, but he's also pragmatic. He has agreed to a truce, a treaty to secure his territory against men like you, Amos, who try to run cattle where they shouldn't. What does this have to work with Olivia? Amos whispered, though he already knew. Silas has demanded a gesture of trust, a permanent bond to seal this truce. He has demanded a white wife. The silence on the porch was absolute, broken only by the buzz of a distant fly. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she breathed. "Yes," Thorne said, his eyes glittering. "He wants a bride from a ranching family, a symbol. I thought of you immediately, Amos. You're worthless, but your daughter. She is a suitable offering. Marry her to Silas, and I will personally tear up your $5,000 note. Refuse." He shrugged. "I take the ranch. You'll be beggars on the street, and I guarantee no one in this territory will hire you. You'll starve, and your daughter," his eyes raked over her again, "will find a much worse fate in a town saloon than as the wife of a powerful chief." You can't," Olivia said, her voice shaking but finding a core of steel. "You would sell me? To a savage?" "I'm saving you, girl." Amos suddenly rounded on her, his fear making him cruel. "It's a marriage, an honorable one. He's a chief, a king in his own way. You'll be safe. You'll save your father." "Save you," Olivia shot back, venom in her voice. You coward." "It's a done deal," Thorne said, placing his hat back on his head. "I told him I would bring the bride in 3 days. Be ready at dawn. My men will escort you." He turned and walked back to his buggy. "And Olivia," he said, not looking back, "don't even think about running. There isn't a place in this territory I can't find you, and I'll be much less accommodating if you make me chase you." He left. The black buggy disappeared over the ridge, leaving only a cloud of choking dust. Olivia turned to her father, the man who was supposed to protect her. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the floorboards. "You've killed me," she whispered. "I've saved us," he replied, his voice hollow. Olivia knew then that she was truly, utterly alone. She was a lamb being led to a wolf, and the man holding the rope was her own father. The 3-day ride was a blur of silent terror. Olivia rode her own mare, a gentle bay named Willow, but she was flanked by 2 of Thorne's hired guns, Deacon Miles and a younger, nervous cowboy. Deacon was the true threat. He was a gaunt man, with a face like dried leather, and eyes that held a chilling emptiness. He was rumored to have ridden with Quantrill's raiders, a distinction that meant he had a taste for cruelty. He never spoke to Olivia, just watched her. They rode north, out of the familiar dusty plains, and into the rolling, unfamiliar territory near the Wichita Mountains. This was Comancheria. Her world. On the morning of the 3rd day, they stopped in a shallow, rocky basin. "This is the place," Deacon said, his voice like gravel. "Thorne said they'd meet us here." Olivia's hands, bound by a loose rope, for her own safety, trembled. She scanned the ridges, seeing nothing but rock and sparse, thorny scrub. Then they were simply there. They hadn't ridden in. They had materialized. Perhaps a dozen warriors, mounted on powerful paint-streaked ponies. They were silent, their faces stern, their eyes fixed on the white intruders. And at their head, one man sat taller than the rest, his presence a physical weight in the air. Silas Stoneheart. He was nothing like the grunting savage of her imagination, and that was almost more terrifying. He was tall for a Comanche, with broad shoulders and a face that looked carved from the surrounding red rock. A single ancient scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, puckering the skin. His black hair was braided, woven with eagle feathers. He wore buckskin leggings and a beaded breastplate, but his most arresting feature was his stillness. He watched them, his black eyes unblinking, betraying no thought, no emotion. Nothing. Deacon Miles dismounted, holding his hands up, palms out. "We bring the bride," he called out, as agreed upon by Jedediah Thorne, Olivia Harrington. Silas said nothing. His gaze moved from Deacon to Olivia. It was not a look of lust or even interest. It was the look a man might give a horse he was purchasing, an assessment of stock. He appraised her for a long, humiliating moment, then gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. One of his warriors dismounted and walked forward, leading a pony. He stopped in front of Olivia. Deacon, with a rough grip, pulled her from Willow's saddle. "No," Olivia gasped, clutching the saddle horn. "Willow, she's my horse." "He don't care about your horse, girl," Deacon sneered. He shoved her forward. Olivia stumbled, catching herself before she fell. The warrior grunted, gesturing impatiently at the pony. She was being traded. She looked back at Deacon. "You're just leaving me?" "That's the deal," Deacon said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. He swung back into his saddle. "Good luck with your husband." He and the other man turned their horses and rode away, not once looking back. They left her mare, Willow, standing nervously, her reins trailing in the dust. Olivia was alone, surrounded by a dozen strange warriors, facing a man whose reputation was built on bloodshed. Silas Stoneheart finally moved. He nudged his horse forward, stopping directly in front of her. He looked down, and for the first time, Olivia felt the full, crushing force of his presence. He was the wilderness. He was the storm. He was everything she had ever been taught to fear. He reached down, not to help her, but to grab the lead rope of the pony he'd brought. He looped it once, then turned his own horse around and began to ride north, pulling her mount and her behind him. He hadn't said a single word. The journey to the village was hours long, a silent procession. Olivia, numb with shock and grief, just held on. They rode deep into the mountains, through canyons so narrow the sun barely touched the bottom, until they emerged into a wide, hidden valley. The village was large, a sprawling collection of tipis, smoke staining the blue sky. Dogs barked, children stopped their games to stare, and women paused from scraping hides to watch the procession. Their faces were not kind. They were curious, but also hostile. Olivia saw contempt in their eyes. Silas rode to the largest tipi, set slightly apart from the others. He dismounted in one fluid motion. He dropped the lead rope of her pony and walked away, disappearing inside the tipi. He had left her. Again. She sat on the pony, frozen, the object of 100 hostile stares. A moment later, an older woman with a severe face and hard eyes emerged from the tipi. She barked something at Olivia in a language she couldn't understand. She grabbed Olivia's arm and yanked her, none too gently, from the horse. The woman shoved her toward a smaller, older tipi on the edge of the camp. It was dark and smelled of old smoke and dust. The woman pointed inside, then pointed to a stack of buffalo robes and a bucket. The message was clear. This was her home, not the chief's lodge. This, and there was work to be done. Olivia sank onto the dusty floor, the reality of her situation crashing down. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't even a high-status prisoner. She was an outcast, a slave, and her husband, the most feared man in the territory, hadn't even deemed her worthy of a single word. The first week was a study in humiliation. The second was a lesson in survival. Olivia learned quickly that her old life meant less than nothing here. She was the Tekwa, the white woman. She was a pariah. The woman who had claimed her was named Topsana. She was Silas's widowed aunt, a formidable woman who held a high status in the tribe, and who clearly, deeply resented Olivia's presence. It was Topsana who woke her before dawn with a sharp kick to the ribs, who set her to the most brutal, menial tasks, hauling water from the creek, scraping the stinking fly-covered hides, digging for roots until her hands were raw and bleeding. The other women followed Topsana's lead. They spoke in rapid, guttural tones, laughing when Olivia stumbled, knocking over her bucket of water, by accident, forcing her to make the long trip to the creek again. They were cruel, but Olivia understood it. She was the symbol of the world that was choking them, the world of men like Jedediah Thorne. And of Silas she saw almost nothing. He did not live in the small, worn teepee with her. He remained in his own lodge. He was a constant, distant presence. She saw him conferring with his warriors, organizing hunts, or simply sitting atop his horse on a nearby ridge, watching the valley. He was every bit the chief. His word was law. His presence commanded immediate respect. He never spoke to her. He never looked at her. When he passed by, his gaze slid over her, as if she were a rock or a shrub. It was, Olivia thought, a more profound cruelty than any beating. She had been forced to marry this man, and he didn't even acknowledge her existence. Her terror began to curdle into a slow, burning anger. Why her? Why agree to this marriage if he found her so repulsive? Was this Thorne's plan all along? To have her abandoned and broken, dying of overwork in a hostile camp? But as the weeks turned into a month, Olivia's sharp eyes began to see things. Her survival depended on observation. She watched Silas. She saw him not just as the silent warrior, but as the leader. She saw him settle a dispute between two men, not with threats, but with a few quiet, firm words. She saw a small child, no older than 4, run up to him, brave and laughing. Silas, the feared stone heart, had paused, a flicker of something in his eyes, and had rested his hand on the boy's head for just a moment. The gesture was so brief, so gentle it seemed impossible. She saw him with his horses. He had a magnificent black stallion, and he spoke to it in low, soft tones, the same language the women used to mock her, but his voice was completely different. This was a man of profound contradictions. The Stoneheart persona was real. She had seen him when a scout returned with news of intruders. The man who had mounted his horse that day was the man of the legends, his face a mask of cold fury. But the man with the child, the man with the horse, that was someone else. Her isolation was her prison, but it was also her shield. No one spoke to her, so no one watched her too closely, assuming she was too beaten down to be a threat. One evening, a violent thunderstorm, typical of the late summer, rolled into the valley. The sky turned a bruised purple, and lightning cracked the ridges. Rain fell in solid, driving sheets. The camp hunkered down, the teepees groaning against the wind. Olivia was in her miserable lodge, soaked and cold, when she heard a sound outside. It was the terrified whinny of a horse. She peered out. A young colt, not yet fully trained, had broken free from its tether in a panic. It was running wildly, its eyes white, heading straight for the creek, which was already beginning to swell into a raging, muddy torrent. Several warriors ran out, shouting, but the colt, blind with fear, evaded them and plunged into the churning water. It was immediately swept downstream. The warriors stopped, lowering their ropes. The colt was lost. It was a hard loss, but not worth a man's life. Then, a figure shot past Olivia's teepee. It was Silas. He was moving without a sound, running full tilt along the bank. He didn't hesitate. He ran ahead of the struggling colt, judged the current, and dove into the raging water. Olivia's heart stopped. He vanished. The women screamed. Then he reappeared, his arm locked around the colt's neck, fighting the current, his legs churning. He was impossibly strong. He wasn't fighting the water. He was using it, angling himself and the horse toward a shallow bend. He burst from the water, dragging the half-drowned, trembling colt with him. He was gasping, his buckskins plastered to him, but he was alive. He stroked the horse's neck, speaking those same soft, low words, calming it down until its trembling eased. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the camp, and for a second his eyes met Olivia's. She was standing in the rain, staring, her hand over her mouth. He didn't scowl. He didn't look away. He just held her gaze. For 1, 2, 3 seconds. There was no coldness. There was just a profound, bottomless exhaustion. Then he turned, leading the colt back to its tether, and disappeared into his own lodge. Olivia retreated into her teepee, her body shaking, but not from the cold. A man who would risk his life for a terrified animal was not a simple brute. He was not a savage. He was something far more complex. The heart that no one knew wasn't just hidden. It was guarded. It was a fortress. And for the first time, Olivia wasn't just afraid of him. She was desperately, agonizingly curious. Olivia's curiosity became a quiet obsession. She finished her chores with a new, mechanical efficiency, her mind focused on the puzzle of Silas. She had to know. Why this? Why her? She began to watch his routine. He would leave the camp every few nights, always alone, always after the moon was high. He wouldn't take his war pony, but a simple Mustang. He would ride east, toward the broken canyons. The warriors said he was communing with the spirits. Topsana said he was gathering his strength for war. Olivia believed it was something else. One night, 2 months into her captivity, she decided to follow him. It was a reckless, foolish decision. If she were caught, the punishment would be severe. But the thought of spending one more day in this agonizing, silent ignorance was worse. She slipped out of her teepee, a shadow among shadows. The camp was asleep. She kept to the dark side of the creek, her bare feet making no sound on the soft earth. He was easy to follow. The clear moonlight cast his shadow long and dark ahead of her. He rode for a mile into a narrow, winding canyon she had been warned away from. He dismounted, tied his horse, and then he vanished. He walked toward a sheer rock face and was simply gone. Olivia waited, her heart hammering. She crept forward. There, hidden by a curtain of ancient dried ivy, was a dark fissure in the rock. A cave. She hesitated. This was his private place. To enter was an unforgivable violation. But she had come this far. Taking a deep breath, she slipped through the ivy. The passage was narrow and dark, sloping downward. She smelled smoke. She saw a faint, flickering light. She crept closer, her footsteps muffled by the sand on the cave floor. The passage opened into a small, dry cavern. A small fire burned in a stone ring, casting a warm, orange glow. A bedroll was laid out, but Olivia's eyes were fixed on the man. Silas was sitting by the fire. He was not in his leathers. He wore a simple breechcloth, his back to her. But he wasn't chanting. He wasn't painting his face for war. He was reading. In his hands, he held a small, leather-bound book, its pages worn and soft. His head was bent, his focus absolute. He spoke, his voice low. "If you are to strike, do it from the front. A snake waits in the shadows." Olivia gasped, stumbling back. He hadn't turned. He hadn't moved. He had known she was there. He rose, slowly, and turned to face her. The stone heart mask was gone. His face was unpainted, and in the firelight, the scar seemed softer. His eyes were not cold. They were intelligent, sharp, and laced with a deep, profound sadness. "You are a very quiet walker, Tekwao," he said. Olivia's mind stalled. It wasn't the words. It was the voice. It was not the guttural Comanche language. It was perfect, unaccented, educated English. The English of a Boston drawing room, not a Texas plain. You speak English," she stammered, feeling like a fool. "Among other things," he said, gesturing to the book. "French, Latin, and of course Comanche. Sit. The snake has already seen you." Numbly, she sat on a rock opposite him. He sat back down. "Who? What?" She couldn't form the question. He held up the book. She could see the title in the firelight. "King Lear." "Shakespeare," he said. "A story about a foolish old king who trusts the wrong people. He values words over loyalty, a fatal mistake." "I don't understand," Olivia whispered. "They said you were a savage." A bitter laugh escaped him. It was a shocking, human sound. "They say many things. What is your name?" "You know my name. Olivia Harrington." "No, that is the name Jedediah Thorne gave me. That is the name of a bargain. I want your name." "It's Olivia," she said, confused. "Very well, Olivia." He closed the book, setting it down with care next to a small, neat stack of others. "I am Silas. That is the name I was given. My people," he gestured to the world outside the cave, "call me Tavibo, the Sunriser. The settlers call me Stoneheart. I answer to all three. It depends on who is asking." "How?" she asked, her voice small. "How do you have these? How do you—" He looked into the fire, his story emerging into the small cave. "When I was a boy named Tavibo, a cavalry patrol attacked my village. It was a mistake. They thought we were Kiowa. They killed my father. My mother hid me, but they found me. They took me. A charitable captain, a man named Richard Howard, took pity on the poor heathen child. He sent me east." Olivia listened, horrified and rapt. "I was sent to a mission school outside Philadelphia. I was given the name Silas. I was beaten for speaking my language. I was taught to read, to write, to pray to a God who watched his people slaughter mine. I was their star pupil." He said the words with biting sarcasm. "I learned your history, I learned your poetry, and I learned your hypocrisy. For 10 years I was Silas. I was your success story. What happened? Captain Howard died. His charity fund died with him. The school no longer had a use for an educated Indian who was no longer a child. I was put on a train and sent back west. Civilized. They let me off at Fort Sill with a new suit and $20. I walked out into the prairie, tore the suit from my body, and went to find my people." He looked at her, his eyes burning with an intensity that seared her. "I found what was left of them, starving, being pushed onto reservations by men like Thorne. They didn't recognize me. I was a stranger. I had to earn my place back. I had to be more Comanche than the ones who never left. I had to be harder, colder, stronger. I used the education they gave me against them. I learned their tactics. I learned how to think like them. And I became Stoneheart, a name I earned when I drove Thorne's surveyors out of this valley with only 10 warriors. A name I cultivate. Fear is a weapon. The only one they have left us." Olivia finally understood. The silence, the coldness. It was a mask, a necessary, painful, all-consuming lie to protect his people. A new, more terrible thought occurred to her. "Then, why?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why me? Why this marriage? If you hate our world so much, why chain yourself to me?" Silas's face hardened, the brief vulnerability vanishing. "That," he said, his voice dropping, "is the part of the story you do not understand." I did not demand a wife, Olivia. Thorn offered one. Olivia stared at him, the crackle of the fire filling the sudden, heavy silence. What? What do you mean? Thorn told my father you demanded a white bride to seal the truce. Silas let out another of those short, bitter laughs. Thorn's tongue is forked. He speaks only lies. I have been fighting his encroachment for 2 years. His men poison our waterholes. They kill the buffalo for sport. The army at Fort Sill, they do nothing. Their commander is a weak man who fears Thorn's political connections. He rose and paced the small cave, his shadow leaping across the walls. I knew I could not win a war. Not forever. We are too few. Our neighbors, the Quahadi band under Quanah Parker, they are strong, but they are far north. We are alone here. So I tried to make a different kind of peace. I sent word to Thorn that I would talk. A truce, Olivia said. A truce, he agreed, nodding. He met me. Not in his fine buggy, but on the plains. He was afraid of me. Good. He proposed a treaty. He would respect the borders of this valley in exchange for safe passage for his supply wagons north. It was a lie, but it was a start. And then he offered the gesture of goodwill. He offered me his business partner's daughter in marriage. Olivia felt sick. His partner? Amos Harrington. He said you were a willing bride, eager to bridge the two worlds. He painted you as a woman of peace, a woman who understood the plight of the native, a willing sacrifice for peace. He lied, Olivia whispered, the full scope of her father's and Thorn's betrayal crashing down on her. Her father hadn't just sacrificed her. He had painted her as a willing participant. I was forced. He held my father's debt. He threatened to ruin us, to leave us to starve. I had no choice. Silas stopped pacing. He turned and looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time. The assessment was gone. The coldness was gone. In its place was a dawning, terrible understanding. I see, he said, his voice quiet. I believed you were one of them, a spy, a part of his plot. I believed you were your father's daughter, and your father's signature was on the same contracts as Thorn's, the ones that paid bounties for our scalps. No, never. I accepted the marriage, Silas continued, his voice hardening again, because I had no choice either. My scouts had found something. Thorn wasn't bringing supplies north. He was bringing in heavy mining equipment, and he was massing gunmen, a private army, led by a man I know well. Deacon Miles. Deacon, Olivia breathed, remembering the cold-eyed man who had delivered her. A butcher. He doesn't get paid to escort brides. He gets paid to start massacres. I saw Thorn's plan. He was going to break the treaty himself. He needed an excuse, a casus belli. He offered me his willing bride, knowing I would dishonor her. Or so he thought. He would give it a few months, then send Deacon Miles to rescue his partner's abused daughter. He would kill you, Olivia, leave your body where the army could find it, and blame my people. The cavalry would ride, and he would have his war. He would wipe us out, and this valley, and the gold he's convinced is in that river, would be his. Olivia's blood ran cold. This was so much worse than a simple, cruel barter. She was a pawn in a game of slaughter. So, you ignoring me, she said, the pieces fitting together. Leaving me in that tipi, having Topsanna treat me like a slave. It was a test. It was a protection, he countered, his voice sharp. My aunt hates you. She hates all white people. Her husband and son died in the raid that took me. I knew she would watch you. She would work you, but she would keep you isolated. You could not be a spy if you spoke to no one. You could not be a victim if I never touched you. I left you apart, where my people could see you were nothing to me. I was biding my time, waiting to see your hand." "I have no hand," she cried, standing up. "My hand is filled with nothing but the dirt Topsanna makes me dig. I am as much your prisoner as I am Thorn's." He met her gaze. The firelight danced in his dark eyes. "You were, but now you are not. You are the one thing Jedediah Thorn never accounted for. You are a pawn that has learned the rules of the game." "What? What does that mean?" "It means," Silas said, stepping closer. He was so tall, so imposing, but she was no longer afraid of him. "Thorn's plan requires a victim. A poor, frail, white woman abused by the savage chief. He expected you to be broken. He expected you to run, to be caught, to be easy to kill." He looked at her hands, calloused and stained from her work. "But you are not broken. You are a survivor. You are still here. And now you know the truth." "What do we do?" she asked, her voice low. "He will not wait much longer. The first snows will come soon. He will make his move before then. He will send Deacon." "We can tell the army," Olivia said. "We can go to Fort Sill." "And say what?" Silas scoffed. "A savage chief and his captive wife? They will rescue you and put me in chains. No, we must expose him. We must catch Deacon in the act. And you are the key." "Me? How?" "You are the bait." The words hung in the air. This was the real test. "He wants me dead," Olivia said, her voice shaking again, but this time with a cold fury, not fear. "Jedediah Thorn, my father, they all want me gone. They sent me here to die." "Yes," Silas said, his voice flat. "They will be disappointed," Olivia said, her eyes hardening, meeting his. "I am not a victim, and I am not bait. I am a trap." A small, genuine smile touched the corner of Silas's mouth. It transformed his face, erasing the stone heart entirely. "Good," he said, "because Deacon Miles is already riding." They left the cave together, the sky outside turning a pale, pre-dawn grey. The camp was just beginning to stir, when Olivia walked with Silas, not behind him or apart from him, but at his side. The effect was immediate. Topsanna, emerging from her tipi, froze. Her mouth fell open. The women fetching water stopped and stared. Silas, however, walked as if this was the most natural thing in the world. He led Olivia not to her small, worn-out lodge, but to his own. He pulled back the flap and gestured for her to enter. It was spacious and clean. Thick buffalo robes covered the floor. His weapons, a lance, a bow, and a cavalry rifle, were hung with care. This was the lodge of the chief. "You will stay here," he said, his voice reverting to the public, clipped tones she was used to, but his eyes held their new understanding. "No one will harm you." "Topsanna," Olivia began. "My aunt will obey me," Silas said. "Her anger is a shield for her grief. She will see, in time." A warrior rushed up, breathing hard. His name was Comanche, Topsanna's only surviving son. He was young, arrogant, and had always viewed Silas's leadership with a jealous eye. He hated Olivia more than anyone. He spoke in rapid Comanche, his voice full of rage, gesturing at Olivia. Olivia didn't need a translation. He was protesting. He was calling her a spy, a white devil. He was accusing Silas of being bewitched. Silas listened, his face impassive. When Comanche finished, Silas replied in a low, dangerous voice. The camp gathered, watching. Comanche shouted back, defiant. He was challenging his chief. "What is he saying?" Olivia asked, her stomach tightening. Silas glanced at her. "He says I am weak, that I have taken a white snake to my bed. He says I have forgotten his father and brother, who died at the hands of men like yours. He demands I give you to him, to dealt with. As a traitor. And you? I am telling him, Silas said, his voice never rising, that you are my wife, and that any man who touches you will answer to me. Comanche, enraged, spat on the ground at Olivia's feet. It was the ultimate insult. Before Olivia could even flinch, Silas moved. He was not the calm, reading philosopher from the cave. He was stone-hard. He blurred, his hand striking Comanche across the face with a crack that echoed through the silent camp. Comanche stumbled back, shock and fury on his face. He drew his knife. "Silas, no!" Olivia cried. But Silas didn't draw his own. He stood, his hands open. He spoke in English, for her. "This is not how we are strong, Comanche." Then, switching back to Comanche, he barked an order. Comanche, blinded by rage, lunged. Silas didn't strike him. He moved inside the younger man's attack, using his opponent's own momentum. He twisted, catching Comanche's knife arm, and in one fluid, powerful motion, threw him to the ground. He landed hard, the breath knocked from him, his knife skittering away. Silas placed a foot on his chest, not with crushing weight, but with symbolic finality. He spoke to the assembled crowd. "He is right. I have not forgotten the dead. I remember them every day." His voice boomed. "But I will not honor their memory by leading the living into a needless grave. His way," he pointed at the gasping Comanche, "is the way of rage. It leads to slaughter. My way leads to tomorrow. The white woman is not the enemy. The enemy is the man who sent her. And we," he looked down at Comanche, "will fight him. Not each other." He removed his foot and offered his hand to Comanche. Humbled, his face a mask of shame, Comanche ignored the hand, but scrambled to his feet. He picked up his knife, and without a word, stalked away. Silas had won. He had shown his strength, but tempered it with wisdom. He had defeated his rival without killing him. He turned back to Olivia. A scout just returned. Deacon Miles and 10 men. They are not riding for the camp. They are riding for the Two Crow Creek, 5 miles east, Thorn's Gold River. "They're going to set the trap," Olivia said. "They are going to be the trap," Silas replied. He turned to his warriors. "We ride." "Wait," Olivia said. The warriors paused. "You said I was the key. I'm coming with you." Silas stared at her. "It is a battle, Olivia. Not a place for a woman," she shot back. "I'm not the woman who arrived here. I'm not the bait. I've hauled water. I've scraped hides. I've survived your aunt. I'm not staying here to be protected. Deacon is coming for me. He'll have to find me first." A new respect entered his eyes. "You cannot fight." "I can think," she said. "I know how Deacon thinks. He's an ex-raider. They don't fight fair. They're bullies. They prefer ambushes and overwhelming force. They won't be expecting us to ambush them." "She is right," Silas said to his warriors. "She knows the enemy. She rides." He grabbed the cavalry rifle from his lodge and tossed it to her. Her arms buckled, but she caught it. "Can you use this?" he asked. "My father taught me to shoot," Olivia said, her voice firm. "At least he was good for something." Silas nodded. "Then ride with me, Olivia Harrington. Ride with me as my wife." The canyon leading to Two Crow Creek was a narrow gash in the earth, all jagged red rock and shadow. Silas led his 10 best warriors, with Olivia riding beside him. They moved like phantoms, their ponies' hooves muffled on the sandy floor. "They will come this way," Silas said, his voice a low rumble. "It is the only clear path to the creek. They will be loud. They want to be found, but only after their work is done." "What work?" Olivia asked. "They will set explosives," he said, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. "To discover the gold. They will foul the creek, kill the game, and they will wait for a scout to see them. Then discover your body." "Then we mustn't let them reach the creek," Olivia said. She looked up. The canyon walls were steep, littered with loose rock and boulders. "There," she said, pointing. "Above that narrow bend. Can your men get up there?" Silas followed her gaze. "Yes." "Deacon thinks he's the only one who sets ambushes. He'll ride right into it. If your men can send those rocks down, they can block the canyon. Separate him from his men. Trap them." Silas looked at her, his eyes sharp. "That is good. That is a smart trap." He gave a series of low clicks and hand signals. In seconds, 5 of his warriors, including Comanche, who gave Olivia a look of grudging respect, were scaling the rock face, silent as spiders. Silas, Olivia, and the remaining 5 warriors concealed themselves in a dense thicket of chokecherry bushes near the bend. They waited. An hour passed. The only sound was the wind. Then Olivia heard it. The jingle of a harness, the low murmur of white men's voices, rough and careless. Deacon Miles rode into view. He looked just as he had the day he'd delivered her, gaunt, uncaring, his rifle resting easy in his saddle. His 10 men followed, laughing at a crude joke. They were relaxed, confident, riding into what they believed was their own territory. They reached the bend. Olivia saw Silas raise his hand, palm open. He dropped it. A high, ululating cry came from the cliffs above. It was Comanche. It was the signal. There was a deep rumble, and then the sky seemed to fall. Boulders, rocks, and a cascade of shale poured down into the canyon. Deacon's men screamed. Their horses reared, panicked. The slide was perfect. It landed directly in their midst, splitting the group. Deacon and 2 of his men were on the near side. The other 8 were on the far side, their way completely blocked by a 10-foot-high wall of new rock. "Now!" Silas roared. He burst from the bushes, his warriors fanning out, unleashing arrows. The 8 trapped men, disoriented and panicked, were easy targets. It was over in seconds. But Deacon was a different breed. He hadn't panicked. He'd spun his horse, his rifle already at his shoulder. He fired, hitting one of Silas's warriors in the arm. "The white woman!" Deacon yelled to his 2 remaining men. "Thorn pays double for her head." They charged, not at Silas but at Olivia. Olivia fumbled with the heavy rifle, her heart in her throat. She raised it, trying to remember her father's lessons. Breathe, squeeze. One of the men was almost on her. She fired. The recoil slammed her shoulder, and the shot went wild. Before the man could reach her, Silas was there. He intercepted the horse, his own body crashing into the man, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. Silas's knife flashed. The other man aimed his pistol at Olivia. An arrow from one of Silas's warriors took him in the throat. It was just Deacon. He was dismounted, using his dead horse as cover. He and Silas were now in a standoff. "Give her up, Chief!" Deacon yelled, his voice echoing. "You're a dead man either way. Thorn has the army on his side." "Thorn has nothing," Silas yelled back, motioning for his men to hold. Deacon was clever. He saw Olivia, exposed, struggling to reload the rifle. He saw Silas protecting her. He raised his own rifle, not at Silas, but at Olivia. He knew Silas would have to move to block the shot. "Silas, no!" Olivia screamed. Silas didn't hesitate. He broke cover, moving to put his body between her and Deacon. Deacon smiled. He shifted his aim from Olivia to the now exposed Silas. He had baited the trap. Breathe, squeeze. Olivia didn't aim. She just acted. She pulled the trigger. The rifle boomed. Deacon screamed. He didn't fall. He just dropped his rifle, staring in disbelief at his right hand. It was a mangled, bloody ruin. Olivia had shot the rifle, and the exploding mechanism had destroyed his hand. He staggered to his feet, clutching his arm, his face white with pain and shock. Silas and his warriors surrounded him. Comanche raised his lance to finish him. "No!" Silas commanded. Comanche stopped, incredulous. "He is a butcher. He would have killed us all." "He is worth more alive," Silas said. He turned to Olivia. She was shaking, the heavy rifle drooping in her hands. He walked to her, his face unreadable. He stopped in front of her. He gently took the rifle from her hands. "You missed," he said. Olivia stared at him, confused. "I told you to shoot him," Silas said. A small smile played on his lips. "Not his gun." Olivia let out a choked laugh, a sob, a breath of relief. Silas turned to Deacon. "Bind his wounds, tightly. We want him to live." "Why?" Olivia asked. "Because," Silas said, looking at the broken, groaning man. "He is our message. We are going to Fort Sill, and this time we are bringing the evidence." The arrival at Fort Sill was a scene of pandemonium. A dozen Comanche warriors, painted for war, riding calmly up to the main gate, was unheard of. Soldiers scrambled to the palisades, rifles aimed. A young lieutenant, his face pale, demanded they halt. Silas held up his hand, palm open. "We come in peace. We bring a prisoner, and we bring Olivia Harrington. We wish to speak to the commander." Olivia rode forward, positioning herself next to Silas. "It's true. We have Deacon Miles, Jedediah Thorne's man. He attacked us. Please, we have to speak to the commander." Her presence, alive and unharmed, changed everything. The commander, a weary-eyed older man named Major Elliot, agreed to see them. They met in the post's main office, Silas, Olivia, and Deacon Miles, who was now half-conscious from pain. Silas, in his calm, perfect English, laid out the entire plot. He explained the forced marriage, Thorne's lies, the plan to incite a war, and the gold that Thorne was using to justify it all. Major Elliot listened, his face growing darker. He had long suspected Thorne, but had no proof. "It's his word against mine," Deacon snarled, clutching his ruined hand. "A filthy savage." "No," Olivia said, her voice clear and strong, cutting him off. "It is my word. I am Olivia Harrington. My father, Amos Harrington, conspired with Jedediah Thorne to sell me to this man," she pointed at Silas, "in exchange for a debt. They lied, telling me I was a peace offering. They lied, telling him I was a willing bride. It was a plot to have me killed and start a war. Deacon Miles and his men were sent to murder me and frame the Comanche. It was an act of war, not by the Comanche, but by Jedediah Thorne." Major Elliot looked from Olivia's passionate, truthful face to Deacon's pain-filled, hateful one. "Lieutenant," Elliot ordered, "put this man in the stockade. Send a patrol to Two Crow Creek. I want those other bodies, and I want that mining equipment. And send a patrol to Thorne's ranch. Arrest him. Arrest Amos Harrington, too." Deacon was dragged away, cursing. Elliot looked at Silas. The respect in the old soldier's eyes was clear. "You have done the army a great service, Chief Silas. You prevented a war." "I protected my people, Major," Silas said. "That is all I have ever done. This valley is our home. We want nothing but to be left in peace." "I cannot promise you forever," Elliot said, his voice heavy. "The world is changing. But I can promise you this. As long as I command this fort, your borders will be respected. Thorne's illegal treaty is void. We will write a new one. A real one." "I would welcome that," Silas said. He nodded to the major, then to Olivia. They rode out of Fort Sill not as captives or victors, but as equals. They rode back to the hidden valley, the sun setting at their backs, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood red. When they arrived, the entire camp was waiting. Topsana rushed forward, her eyes scanning her son, Comanche, who was riding tall, his wound bandaged. She looked at Silas, and then at Olivia. The hatred was gone. In its place was a deep, grudging awe. She nodded once to Olivia. It was a beginning. That night, Olivia stood outside the chief's lodge, looking at the stars. She was no longer a prisoner. She was, in theory, free. She could return to the white world. But what was there? Her father was a criminal. Her old life was a ruin. Silas emerged from the lodge. He stood beside her, the stone heart mask gone, perhaps forever. He was just Silas, or Tavibo. "The Major will give you an escort back to town if you wish," he said, his voice quiet. She turned to him. "There is no town for me, Silas. My father, he sold me. The world I knew. It doesn't want me, and I don't want it." "And this world?" he asked. "A hard life, a different people." "It's an honest life," she said. "I've worked harder here than I ever did on my father's ranch. I've been hated, but I have not been lied to. Not by you." He stepped closer. In the moonlight, his scar was just a shadow. "Olivia, you are free. You do not owe me anything." "I know," she said. She reached up, slowly, and touched his face. He didn't flinch. She traced the line of the scar from his temple to his jaw. "They call you Stone Heart. It is who I had to be," he said. "I know who you are," she whispered. "You are the man who reads Shakespeare in a cave. You are the man who dives into a flooded river to save a horse. You are Tavibo, the sunriser." He closed his eyes at the sound of his true name on her lips. He took her hand, the one that had been on his face, and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. It was beating strong and steady beneath his buckskin shirt. "It is not stone, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he had hidden for a decade. "I know," she said, stepping into his embrace. "And neither is mine." He lowered his head, and in the heart of the Comanche Valley, under a sky full of stars, the chief and his white wife sealed their true treaty. Not with a signature or a lie or a bargain of debt, but with a kiss that promised a new, shared, and hard-won tomorrow. The Wild West was built on stories of iron-willed men and the conflicts that defined them. But often, the greatest strength wasn't found in the blast of a rifle, but in the quiet, unbreakable resilience of a hidden heart. Olivia and Silas, two people from different worlds, were forced together by the greed of others, but they chose to forge a new path from the wreckage. They proved that true understanding doesn't come from conquest, but from courage. The courage to see past the war paint, past the prejudice, and to find the person hidden inside. Theirs is a story of survival, of unexpected love, and the powerful, karmic justice that finds even the most shadowed villains. What did you think of Olivia's and Silas's story? Did you see the twist coming? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. Your feedback helps us create more stories you'll love. And if you enjoyed this journey, please like this video, share it with a friend who loves a good story, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.